Hey everybody, I am Jamie Bonfilio. A little about me. I've been working with mushrooms for over a decade now. I have a global company that we do raw material supply, and then we have products, but I'm not going to talk about my company. I'm just going to talk about more what is important right now in the mushroom industry. I'm sure everyone's familiar with mushrooms and fungi. And we're in this huge shroom boom right now. Everybody wants mushrooms in their product. It's not just supplementation, but food, beverage, and we're also talking psilocybin as well. So you have your functional mushrooms, and then you also have your psilocybin mushrooms, which are all fungi. Just one has a little more psychoactive compounds than the other. Well, when I started my venture back in the fungi space, the reason why I ventured out and did my own thing is because of the lack of quality and transparency in North America. Mushrooms have been around forever. Think about Asia and centuries, thousands of years ago, they were using cordyceps as an all tincture for everything. So this is not new medicine. This has been around for a long time. However, here in the US, we're now starting to catch on. And I hate to say this, we're a little slow when it comes to other countries. So when I went ahead and started my company, it was I also used mushrooms because I had severe ulcerative colitis and Crohn's. I was 80 pounds and I was rectally bleeding for 4 months. They wanted to remove my colon and I was like, hell no. And a little bit of background about me is when I was younger, we never did conventional medicine. My grandmother took me to different tribal reservations, and everything that we did, we made ourselves. When I was sick, my grandma used to give me peyote tea. And it wasn't for the psychoactive aspect, it was for the medicinal, physical aspect of what it did for my body when I was younger. So as I got older, I didn't want to go do all this conventional stuff that they were pushing at me, like suppositories and things like that. And so I dove into mushrooms. I discovered chaga. Chaga is truly the #1 mushroom for any gut disorder, 100%. They have done so many studies on chaga. So this isn't like a placebo thing, right? This is actually accredited studies showing that it repairs your gut, the inflammation, the lining, the bacteria, everything. By a year of taking chaga and actually making my own medicine, I went into complete remission. Now I just keep getting fatter. I can't lose weight, but I'm healthy, and it's been over 10 years, right? So that's really what got me dove into the mushroom space. And then when I started, going out buying products, I was like, well, wait a minute, what is in this product? I was very confused. Was it a mushroom? Was it the fruiting body? Was it the mycelium? I had no idea. So starting my company all was a spark from my own health transition. But when I did start my company, the one thing I was noticing was the quality. So about 95% of all mushrooms that come in from overseas is about 40 to 60% chopped with dextrin and lactose and other additives. It is not a pure fruiting body mushroom. And just for if you guys don't know what fruiting body means, that is the actual mushroom itself. That is the meat, like say portobello's, that is a fruiting body. The mycelium is the root system. So the mycelium, what that does, it's the root system. It brings in the nutrients to produce the fruiting body. They both have amazing benefits if they're pure. But when they're chock full of additives and other things, they're not going to give you the purity or the potency and the therapeutic benefits that you're looking for. So fruiting bodies, and this is today. This wasn't when I started back in 2017 when I made my own. I was in the mushroom space long before that. But when I started my own venture, everything that was coming in when I was testing it was showing to be a large amount of additives. And then the mycelium that I was finding was actually grain or oats. So it would be the mycelium grown on the grain, and then they'd freeze dry it and they would call it a mushroom. That is not a fruiting body. It's just mycelium with additives. Just like the fruiting body wasn't really a fruiting body extract. It was the mushroom with dextrin. So over the last 7 years, at least with what we do, it all starts from the growing process. And this doesn't matter if it's a functional mushroom like reishi to psilocybin. And I'm going to kind of cover both. It's all fungi, right? Again, one has a psychoactive compounds, the others do not. When you go out as a consumer or somebody that's starting to embrace mushrooms, you really need to know the whole way that the mushroom was grown. Where did it come from? You need to have that connection. We are so disconnected with our food and everything else. We don't know half the time where your meat comes from, where your milk comes from, where your vegetables or fruit come from. Mushrooms are very finicky. If you do not grow them correctly on their natural substrates, even with the mycelium through liquid fermentation, you are not going to get those therapeutic compounds that we're all looking for medicinal properties for health, wellness, cancer, all of that, right? So it truly starts from the growing process. When it's grown correctly, mushrooms are like us. We absorb the food we eat. It makes us, gives us that vibration. We're healthy. We can thrive, everything. Well, mushrooms are the same way. They get their food from their substrates. Chaga is a good species to talk about. It is actually a parasite. It is toxic to the birch trees. Right? It doesn't inoculate every birch tree with its spores. It only goes after the birch trees that are wounded. Once the chaga gets into the birch tree, then it starts feeding off the chaga. And then they become one. It's crazy. When the chaga tree dies, the birch tree dies, the chaga dies. They start relying on one another, but that's how the chaga gets the betulum and all these other compounds needed to be therapeutic for us, right? And for the mushroom itself. So it's super important that, if you are going to go take a mushroom product, that you ask these questions. Where are these grown? How are they grown? What is the process? Are you taking a product that is just a dried mushroom powder grinded up? Do you think that if you took a dried mushroom powder, you would get a benefit?
You'd probably have some calories.
Mm-hmm. Well, so the problem with dried mushrooms is the outer housing of a mushroom is fiber. It's called chitin. It is not bioavailable. Our bodies do not break it down. So we have to heat and break it down. And that's where one of the main compounds lies, is the beta glucan, is in the fiber. So beta glucans are like the immune system of a mushroom. It is like that, it's the housing of the mushroom. But then you have, say for cordyceps. Cordyceps' main compound besides beta glucans are cordycepian. Cordycepian is the therapeutic aspect of the mushroom, and there's other compounds as well. So yes, you want to make sure the beta glucans are bioavailable by heat and breaking them down, so your body is absorbing them correctly, but you also want to be able to extract the other medicinal aspects. So if you just take the mushroom and you grind it up and you just put it in a capsule, you're not getting a benefit. But if you take dried mushrooms and you heat activate them, say you make a tea, you let it steep for 24 hours, you're breaking that down and now you're making your own medicine. So it's super important to take the mushrooms, whatever you're wanting to do, if you want to make your own medicine, to make sure they're also extracted. Another thing that we're seeing a lot, and the reason why I'm talking about quality and transparency is because as a supplier, we're in a shroom boom, and that's what I call it. everybody wants to have mushrooms, and it doesn't matter what it is. Like I said, beverage, chocolates, supplements, food, flavoring, whatever, because it is the fastest growing market right now here in North America. They're projecting in the next 5 years an $80 billion growth with just functional mushrooms, and this psilocybin is on its own, spectrum. It is going to be the #1 functional food in North America. But because this is happening, just like I go back to a lot of the stuff that's being cut with additives, there's no regulations. There's no transparency. People are getting sick. They have no idea what's in the product and if it really is what's on the label. And when I talk about regulations, I'm not talking about the FDA. I'm not saying, hey, the FDA needs to come in here and be like, okay, nope, we need to see A, B, and C. I'm talking about there needs to be a board, a committee that oversees standards and regulations on mushroom farming, extraction, and processing, and also testing. And there's none of that. And there's none of that, by the way, globally. When I started this back in 2017, one of the biggest things that I was fighting for was better testing. It took me over 7 years to finally get a lab to jump on board, step out of the box, and do deeper testing on the actives of mushrooms. The global standard right now, the only thing they test for is heavy metals, micros, and beta-glucans. Beta-glucans to me don't mean anything. Again, it's the immune system of the mushroom. It's one of the main compounds. But if you don't have all these other actives that are in the mushrooms, all the studies you see, all the hype you see on the internet, Google, wherever they're flashing up, you're not getting those benefits. You really need to make sure there's therapeutic amounts of these active compounds and that it's being processed correctly. And so no facility has ever tested for that until we brought it to the market. And we're still having a hard time testing lion's mane and turkey tail, because there hasn't been a method developed yet for like the PSK and all that in turkey tail. I mean, it's just still foreign, right? And so we're hoping that throughout this transition with this global I think being here at Burning Man for the first time is starting to affect my brain.
Oh yeah, me too.
I'm just like, huh? But I'm feeling like, we're making that bigger step to be more transparent, showing the therapeutic amount, showing the levels. So when somebody is taking a mushroom for medicine, and I'm talking functional mushrooms, when they're taking it for medicine, that they're really getting a potency for healing. It's funny when I started this whole mission, I didn't go into retail stores. I am probably the only mushroom company on the market that is in actual cancer clinics, psychiatry clinics, GI, and family medicine. And we have been for 7 years. It's really amazing to see when the oncologists that I work with say, oh, look at the markers. Of course, I can't see the patient's name, it's private. But to see how mushrooms are changing the markers in cancer patients also that are doing chemotherapy. Because when someone's going through chemotherapy, there's a lot of toxins and all that. Mushrooms get rid of all the nasty side effects from chemo. Plus, they build up your immune system and protect you and help kill the cancer cells. So again, if they're not processed and grown right, you're not going to get these benefits. And the thing is we all should be embracing mushrooms. We should be eating them. We should be taking them as, a supplementation. Everything, it's just making sure that you're truly getting the right process and the right quality that you're putting in your body. I kind of want to talk about too with the psilocybin right now. So we also manufacture, grow, and extract psilocybin in Oregon. And one of the things that I talked about 6 years ago out of the UK, it was a whole psychedelic conference. And my whole lecture was on testing, growing, and extracting. And the biggest thing, again, we're seeing even on the psychedelic space, so many people are passing out samples. I think you just got a sample the other day from someone, and the problem is everybody's getting into the psychedelic space, and there's nothing wrong with that. But again, there is not the transparency and quality and the regulations and making sure, like, oh, well, this is coming from this farm. This is how it's being grown. This is the testing that's being done on it. This is where it's going to be processed. And this is how it's getting into the end product. There's none of that happening. The mushroom space is one of the biggest unregulated spaces right now. And I feel like most natural product space is unregulated, right? Like it because it's not through the FDA. But the mushroom space right now is the worst. We tested recently. We took about 40 different samples off the internet of just all different products out there. Only one, and we didn't test ours. We were just testing random companies, and we do this every quarter just to kind of see, because I'm a big advocate for fighting for regulations and standards, but not the FDA, which is different. And one sample came back showing that it actually had reishi extract in it. So it's really unregulated. And you think it's bad on the functional side, which everyone's buying, right? You just go into the store and there's the wall of shrooms. But on the psilocybin side, it is even worse, because in many places it's not even legal. People are doing this under the radar. They're, in a church, they're doing all this stuff. People are producing products. There is no regulations, and it's now popping up in the news. Somebody recently passed away from a psilocybin chocolate bar. Mushrooms should not kill you. The only mushrooms that should end your life are the ones that you go out and pick in the wild and you're not IDing right, and it's toxic or it's poisonous. And so that's a big concern, that people are going to these places in Canada, all over, wanting to start microdosing. They're with mental health issues, trying to get help and desperate, and not wanting to do marijuana and all this other stuff, because psychedelics are really booming and they are beneficial. And now they're buying products that are potentially dangerous and toxic because there is no stipulations. There is no traceability from start to finish. So I feel, like I could speak tonight on all the different medicinal benefits of lion's mane, cordyceps, all that, but I really feel quality needs to be addressed. This is what people need to be talking about. This is the education that needs to get out there to find the direct supply chain. When you go in and you see a product and you're interested in, do some research. Contact the company and say, hey, where are your mushrooms coming from? Are they extracted? Are there additives? Outreach, because again, in the industry, there is not that education. Everyone goes on TikTok and social media and they're enthralled, and it's like the coolest new thing. They go in and they buy products that are essentially not beneficial, and they're not even getting what they think they're getting. Do you guys all take mushrooms? Like functional mushrooms? Or psychedelics? And do you know your source where you're getting your mushrooms? Yeah. Do you take mushrooms? No. No? Have you ever tried functional or psilocybin?
I tried it with a friend of mine. She gave me too much. I had an episode.
Oh.
But I did have a small amount with her late brother.
Yeah.
A long time ago, and that was I loved it.
Yeah. One thing that we're seeing, bringing up on that point, one thing that I'm seeing too a lot is this new movement of facilitators. Everybody wants to be a facilitator. They go and take a class for 6 weeks, and then they feel, hey, we're gonna go and facilitate a session. We're going to give you some mushrooms. Half the time they don't even know where it's coming from. And they do these sessions, but they're not, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's also not necessarily a good thing, because if somebody is struggling with major, say, schizophrenia or other mental illnesses and they do not know this, and psychedelics are not there, is going to have a negative reaction to somebody that's really struggling. And then how do you cope with that? Or you're facilitating someone that you're taking a product that you're not really sure where it came from. You just got it from someone saying, oh, this is great. It's because it's in a fancy package and this is going to make you feel amazing. And then they're okay for a moment, and then they have a breakdown or a freak out because maybe there's something in that product that's doing a adverse reaction, right? Jeremy was telling me about a friend that he did the exact same thing. He went and took mushrooms and then had a freak out down the road, and that is, again, it's because everyone's starting to jump on psychedelics, it's not a bad thing. I come from an environment where medicine's very sacred. Growing up with Native Americans, they do not share their medicine out to what you would call an outsider. It's a very sacred thing. And it's not just about evolving the mind, it's also a physical healing aspect as well. And so when I first came into this space and started producing psilocybin for more of the clinical side, so I work more on the clinical side than I do the recreational side. But when I started doing that, I had a really hard time embracing everyone wanting to do psychedelics. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. This is sacred medicine. This isn't something that you pay for. You don't have to pay for medicine. I had such a hard time. I started finding myself being very judgmental. And it wasn't a good thing. It took me years to kind of step back from my own teachings and the way that I was raised around tribal medicine to say, you know what, this is the way things are now. We're evolving in a different path. People that are outreaching for psychedelics, maybe not through Native Americans, the way I was raised, but there's a reason for it. There's a reason for this evolution. There's so many people struggling with mental illness right now, and PTSD and depression and drug addiction and stuff. There's a reason for this medicine. It's just not, when I first got into this space, I was like, yeah, this is not right. And then shamans and facilitators, I was almost on the defense, and I think I was like that too because of my upbringing, until I had to really open up and say, medicine is medicine, and if people are getting the help they need, that's all that matters. But there still has to be that balance. You can't just go to somebody's basement and say, oh, here's $1,200, give me some medicine. That is not a very safe space. And then to me, I feel like there's got to be more balance, and also with all these clinicians popping up, that you can go and pay thousands of dollars just to do a microdose. At that point, you should be growing your own medicine, growing your own mushrooms and microdosing it yourself and making sure that you're in a safe space. I do feel, though, if you struggle with major depression and anxiety and other things, it is good to have somebody there with you, to guide you, even if it's a family member or a best friend or someone that if you are not going to be okay, that they're there to be able to calm you down and make sure you're okay. It's just I'm seeing more and more with my company and everything else I'm involved with, even a lot of the international lectures I'm doing, it all goes back at the end of the day to quality. We don't talk about that. We talk about the benefits, we talk about what it's going to do for you, We talk about how it's going to change your life and how legalization's happening. It's all over the world, and everyone's jumping on. And then we recently had the FDA shut down MDMA. I mean, there's always going to be these ups and downs, but nobody is talking about quality and testing. Testing is so important. We need to make sure that every batch, it doesn't matter from functional to psilocybin, that every single batch is going through these multi-point tests to make sure there's no additives, there's no other foreign things in the product, that you're actually getting the levels of the compounds that you're looking for in the psilocybin and into functional mushrooms, that you're checking heavy metals. Chaga is known to have high amounts of heavy metals because it's wildcrafted, right? Turkey tail is another mushroom that is known to have higher levels of heavy metals. If they're too high, we can't use that mushroom because it becomes toxic. Same with lead. So testing is so vital. Even if you grow your own and you want to be a cultivator, grow your own medicine, you want to do your own extraction, which is very easy to do, take the products that you're growing and processing and take it to a local lab and have them test it. Because if you're not testing to make sure the levels are there, you're not really truly getting a therapeutic benefit. And mushrooms, again, they're just food. All it is therapeutic food with these magic compounds that truly change our life. When you eat a mushroom from culinary, all of them are pretty much culinary, but some you can't chop up, like reishi, stuff like that, chaga. But what the mushrooms do is they first enter your system and they start detoxifying. They're like little scrubbers. They go in your body and they start scrubbing out your system, detoxifying you. And if you're sick, you're going to feel like crap at first. And you're going to be like, oh my God, I'm taking this mushroom and now I feel worse. And what do? Because we're all about instant gratification and we're so used to the pharmaceutical side. We're like, oh yeah, I can't take this. I'm in the bathroom all the time. There's something wrong. No, that is what mushrooms do. They enter our system, they detoxify us, they break our system down, and then they start repairing and balancing. Like I said with the chaga, I was 80 pounds and now I can't lose weight. But I was sick for over almost a year before I went into complete remission. And I had doctors fighting me all the time, like, there's no way a mushroom can do this. I'm like, yeah, there is a way. And again, it's food. It's a therapeutic food, and food, besides breathing, water, food are all the most important things, right? So I just find that, like, if you can really embrace and take mushrooms as a daily, you obviously do not want to do psilocybin every single day. When I have people come up to me and they're like, well, I want to take functional mushrooms, but I also want to be microdosing every day. I'm like, why? Why do you want to microdose every day? Because a lot of people they're not getting the education and the connection they need to understand the medicine, right? They see it in the news or on, like, again, Google, everything else, and they're like, oh, this is gonna save me. They go into a dispensary or wherever, and they're selling all these mushrooms. They're being educated by somebody that really doesn't know the medicine. And truly, if you just, as a human, take mushrooms every day, functional mushrooms, they're truly gonna heal you and keep you balanced and healthy to age beautifully. And then microdose as needed. Be on a regimen where you do 3 days on, and off, or 4, where it's not a daily thing. We don't need to abuse the medicine. It's there to help evolve and trigger and repair. It's a beautiful connection because, again, it's all fungi, but it's just making sure you have the right balance and education around it and going to the right resources to getting that support. But then I'm going to go back and say this again. It starts with quality. You know, if I grew our psilocybin that we extract poorly and just cut corners, used the wrong substrates, and then didn't harvest them when they were actually potent, and grinded it up and gave it to somebody, I would be disrespecting the fungi. I know that sounds weird, but you really don't want to disrespect anything that you're growing, especially that you're putting in your body. And medicine is medicine. And so it's so important to go back and just say, like, your package you got the other day. I mean, I got that I went to the psychedelic conference in Colorado. I was a sponsor and a speaker on growing and distribution here in North America. And when I was at the psychedelic conference, which it was massive, I was so blown away because it is really growing. It's one of the fastest growing spaces right now, which again, that's where I go back to my Native American side going, oh my God, what is happening? And I go, again, the only thing that goes through my head is, who's regulating this? Who's regulating the quality? And when I say regulations, again, it's not the government that I'm saying or the FDA, it's just how things are being done, you know, so you're getting the most effectiveness of whatever you're growing. But I had so many samples passed out to me at that show, I was afraid to try any of them because I had no idea where it was coming from, where it was being processed, and who was actually supplying. And there was one company I said, hey, where are you getting your psilocybin from? They had no idea. And I'm like, okay, so you're just getting it from a middleman, a distributor. Well, where is it being grown? Is it actually psilocybin? Is it being cut with other things? So that's a big thing. It's like being out here in Burning Man. Again, this is my first time ever coming here, and it's so stimulating for me that I find myself going back to my camp at 10:30 because maybe I'm old, or maybe I'm just like, oh shit. There's so much going on. If I took psychedelics out here at Burning Man, I would be a basket case. And I wouldn't do it because when I do psychedelics, it's in a very sacred space, right? But I can imagine people out there that are doing psychedelics, and I'm like, holy hell, no wonder why people freak out, because there's so much stimulation. But then also too, even here, you have no idea what somebody's handing you. And I hate to be that person that's saying, oh, you need to be the quality control here. But people are dying and getting sick from things that they think are gonna make them feel better. And it's only getting worse, you know? And so it's, even though we're in this beautiful place and there's amazing people, you have to ask those questions. Like, hey, where is this coming from? I mean, the gentleman who gave that to you, like, I have never even heard of the company. There's so many new companies coming out, you know, and again, it's like, and I don't know, I think the psychedelic space is always gonna be a little bit more on that gray line, not like the functional space. I sit on a board with the USDA over mushrooms here in North America, but also quality control. There's another organization I'm working with just for mushrooms. And labeling to make sure that companies are held to a standard. Whatever is in that product, they have to list it. If there is added stuff in the product, it has to be on the label. So when a consumer goes by, say, turkey tail or cordyceps, they're like, oh, well, okay, there's cordyceps in here, there's the fruiting body, there's the mycelium, which is the root. Oh, but there's also A, B, and C, these additives in there. So I'm part of a committee that's fighting for better labeling standards, but when it comes to psychedelics, that is a whole other space, because since it's such a gray space right now with different states, legalizations, different countries, I really don't know how they're gonna get it in check without the government stepping in and putting their regulations on it. I mean, I really don't know. Yes?
Is there any effort to do like a ASTM standard for testing or construction or ISO or?
Yeah, so my journey, I need to stop saying my company, sorry. I'm new to Burning Man. But the journey that I started, one of the biggest reasons I went and did my own adventure is because the testing standards globally suck. They're awful. So we have put the first standards in place over the last 7 years. Now other companies are following suit to what we're doing with our testing protocols. And globally as well. I'm leaving in October to speak in India, and that is the main reason I'm going to India to talk about, because they're blowing up with mushrooms right now in the country, and they're having the same issues. And so globally, for decades, there has been just really shitty standards of testing. And so when I started my mission, I was like, no, we need to know everything that's going on with this fungi. Just like if you take herbs or anything else, you really need to know what's in what you're putting in your body, right? Especially if you're using it for therapeutic reasons. If you don't care about the therapeutic reasons, I mean, you really probably shouldn't take mushrooms, because that's what they do. The functional psilocybin's all about therapeutic, physically, mentally. So we have started that new standard. We're still a long ways out, but we've already, since I've started this about now going on 6-7 years, there is a dozen other companies that are following suit with us and rechanging the way they're doing things and testing higher to show consumers like, oh yeah, we meet this standard as well. I have fought forever about trying to get a committee, like, you know how we have a USDA, kosher and all that. There needs to be a certification too for the mushroom industry. And I think it should be that way with any industry. The reason why I think right now with the mushroom industry, this isn't just a small, like, North American growth. Mushrooms are global, and they're blowing up everywhere. They've already been big in Asia and Europe for centuries. North America is getting super big, but now even Europe, like Australia, places in Asia, they're growing very fast with an 80% growth, and there's still not these standards put in place. You can send whatever you want overseas, and there is no quality control checks at all. Nobody is checking what's coming into products, nothing.
Jamie, you talked a lot about testing and higher testing.
Yeah.
Could you describe what that would be like? What labs do? I'm familiar with cannabis testing and those kinds of labs, and herbal testing and whatnot. But what are the mushrooms? Let's say I got a bottle of supplement made from the gastrointestinal chaga, right? And yet, obviously, in capsule form, that's not going to do anything, right?
If it's extracted, yes. It can be in powder caps. It could be powder, capsule, liquid. You can, as long as it's an extract and the quality's there and it's pure and it doesn't have other things.
How would I take those capsules and test them for other ingredients?
So there are now more labs in the US that are doing this. When I started, we were the only lab setting the path. Alita Bioscience, he was the #1 fungi-focused testing facility in North America. He tested about 70% of all mushroom producers here in North America. And then he partnered with me to kind of test out of the box, because I was like, I don't want to just know beta glucans. I don't want just heavy metals and micros. I want to know how much betulum and other stuff is in chaga or whatever, cordyceps, triterpenoids, and reishi, all of that. And so we were the first organization to step out of that box basically and start testing outside and starting to develop new testing methods. Now there is probably about 6 other labs that have followed suit, and it's now becoming the new thing, just like cannabis labs. Cannabis labs always are in competition with each other, right? And they're always like, oh, well, we're going to test for, and I don't know, by the way, I don't know anything about marijuana. Like, I am so naive when it comes to cannabis, but I know everything about fungi. And I'm still learning a lot about mushrooms. It's like you always are expanding. However, with the cannabis industry, like, yeah, there was hundreds of different facilities, and there still is. And most of the labs now that are coming to us that want to partner with us on testing and evolving are cannabis labs. So now a lot of cannabis labs, which they have the ability to do a lot of the testing that most common labs don't. So it's just cannabis and mushrooms in a way are a lot alike. Definitely fungi kingdom is not anything to do with the plant kingdom. But there is, like, when you have a cannabis lab, a lot of the technology carries over to fungi, where we are able to use a lot of the same methods to pull out different compounds. So as somebody like you, say you had a mushroom product and you're just like, I want to go test it, which testing, by the way, is not cheap. It's also inflated a huge amount because, again, mushrooms is the fastest growing space right now in the US. Everyone, again, wants to be a mushroom company, or they want to buy mushrooms. It's like the hot thing right now, right? So now even labs, as a consumer, you can go to a lab, but they're going to charge you a ridiculous amount. But if you want to know good labs, I can definitely recommend some. But that's what you would have to do. Like your product that you have now, I mean, to me, just because of the whole transparency and quality, I would be the type that would call the company and say, where did you get this? What is in here? Is there carriers? What else is added? Because, again, people are getting sick. And another thing is people are getting sick from Amanita. Amanita is a poisonous mushroom. There's a reason why it's red. It's just like, don't eat it. However, it's becoming one of the fastest growing products in the industry because it's legal. You can have Amanita gummies, Amanita vapes, Amanita everything, and companies are even calling it like golden teachers. So they'll label it to make it look like it's psilocybin, but it's not psilocybin. It's totally different. And it is a poisonous mushroom. People die from Amanita, but it's one of the fastest growing fungi that we're seeing at every event that we do. And I do a lot of psychedelic events. Amanita is everywhere. It's because people can sell it, and they can't sell psilocybin. So do you have questions on anything I'm talking about? We have like 10 minutes. Yes.
So how would someone just starting into the mushroom world, how would they evaluate what's a good and safe product?
So have you ever taken functional mushrooms at all?
No, I'm just talking with a doctor from San Francisco, and he wants to help me set
Yeah.
up the program.
So I feel there are phenomenal companies out there, right? Without saying company names, because I learned that you don't do that at Burning Man, the best thing that you could do as somebody diving in is when you look at a company that maybe you're interested in taking, finding out what they're using. Is it a fruiting body mushroom? The fruiting body, again, is the actual mushroom itself. The mycelium is the root system. So when you look at the mycelium, the root system, which there's a lot of products that are only mycelium based, but then they have additives. The mycelium only accounts for 10% of the medicinal benefits of a mushroom. There are benefits in mycelium, but most of the therapeutic compounds, vitamins, minerals, nutrients come from the actual fruit. So looking for a product that either gives you both, or if you're trying to really just dive in to say you want lion's mane, go for the fruiting body, actually the mushroom itself, that you're going to get a higher percentage of the benefits than just a product that might be inoculated on some additive like oats, grain, whatever that's put in there. There is a lot of phenomenal products out there. It's just understanding labels. And then if you have questions, there's always ways to connect to the website of a company or contact them and say, hey, are you using an extract or a dried mushroom? You definitely want to get an extract. Again, dried mushrooms, unless you heat activate them somehow, you're really not getting the benefits. There's no way you can pull out like triterpenoids, cordycepian, all of that from a dried mushroom. So I always tell people, look at a label where it says other ingredients. The best product will say none. Yes.
Is it getting the dried mushroom wet, or is it getting it heated? Hot water?
Heated. So say you go to like the Asian market, which I love the Asian market. They sell the most amazing species of mushrooms, right? Dried whole mushrooms. And this is what I used to do when I was having those health issues before I started my venture in fungi myself. I would just buy it whole and dry, and I would put it in like a crock pot, and I would simmer it for 24 to 48 hours, and I'd make a tea. You know, so even like you could take a dried powder, put it in your coffee, but I feel like that's not a long enough time to break it down. So taking the dried powder, whatever you buy, do a tea, do a simmer, do something that you're heat activating it. Because if you just put it in, again, you put it in a tea for 10, 15 minutes, that's not going to really make a difference. You really want to break down that fiber. The fiber of a mushroom is insane, and our bodies cannot break that down. It is not bioavailable, and that's why if you look at any accredited studies throughout century or past, right, decades in Japan, China, everywhere, which that's where most of the studies come from, it's not a dried powder. It's always a mushroom extract. They're super therapeutic, but you just have to simmer them for a lot longer, if that makes sense.
So an extract is just basically simmering and in water.
So an extract is basically simmering a mushroom in water. That's how the extraction process happens.
So there's different ways of extraction. So you could do a hot water extraction at home to just be self-efficient, right? And that is through hot water simmering. Or you could make your own dual extraction through almost like a tincture, where you would use ethanol and hot water. You could do a tincture. The only problem, I tell people if they do that, they should also, after freeze dry it, to turn it back into a powder, because you don't want the mushrooms to just saturate in ethanol. Ethanol is very abrasive. It actually diminishes a lot of the compounds. So when we do dual extraction, it only goes in there to flash and then it's dissipated. So if you're making it at home, you would just do the same thing, but then you would take that liquid and then you would actually do a freeze dry or dehydration, so you could have a cleaner product.
Another question is, what do you test for?
In the deeper testing, what kind of things are you
There-
looking for? Are the testing methods kind of one of the limiting issues in trying to get a full spectrum of what's in a mushroom?
Yeah. So
Every mushroom we can test, there's probably about 20 different additional compounds that these mushrooms contain. Lion's mane and turkey tail, we can't test for their main actives because there hasn't been methods developed yet. We've tried, nobody's been able to do it. But every other mushroom, there is close to 20 different actives that we're testing on top of the main beta glucan, which is the immune system, and heavy metals, micros, vitamins and minerals and stuff like that. So we do some pretty intense testing. Again, we are the first, I'm the first to bring this to the market just as my own mission and what mushrooms did for my health. You know, I'm a purist. I want to know what it can do. It's so magical. Even with psilocybin, I'm like, well, why is it making me feel this way? Like, there has to be more. And that scientific part of my head, right, dives into it. So we are still limited on a lot that we can't do, but we're developing. So at least with what I'm doing, I have a pretty big spectrum. We also do genetic DNA testing as well. So if I'm like, hey, this is cordyceps, we can genetically verify that it's actually a cordyceps strain, not just, so I think I'm almost out of time. If anyone else has a question.
I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you.
So when people use your mushroom powders in clinical settings, how do they consume those powders, especially if they have pre-existing medical conditions?
On the powders, we always tell people to put it in whatever they're eating or drinking. You just add a half teaspoon, you put it in whatever, you can even cook with it and it doesn't ruin the potency because we've already done the process. However, cancer patients that are going through chemotherapy, they already have a hard time eating. They're in pain, they have loss of appetites. Those clinics usually will recommend putting in capsules so they're able to take it, because when you're going through chemotherapy, the dosing changes. Like ours is about, we measured out 1/4 of a teaspoon is a therapeutic amount. We suggest a half a teaspoon. But if you have stage 4 cancer, they're taking 9 grams almost a day. A half teaspoon is 1 gram. Even though they're potent, even though they're being grown right, processed right, extracted and tested, and we can show variable levels, you still have to take a lot, right? And so a lot of times, the clinics will suggest they have capsules, buy the empty capsules and the machines and make their own capsules. But other people in the clinics, we recommend just putting them in whatever they're eating or drinking, cooking with. When I make pasta, I'm always adding mushrooms to my dough. When I make pizza, anything, I just sprinkle mushrooms in there. I'm a little over the top though. I did bring everyone some mushrooms. I did mask out the name, but I do have a big bag, and since this is a smaller group, I'm gonna give you a handful. Thank you.
Okay. I was all over the place. I can never stay focused.
No, that was so good. Thank you so much. I'll let you do your magic with the mushroom handing out for 5 minutes. We have another chat here in 5 minutes from our friend Rob, who